Thank you for coming today. Today is part 2, Ocean Church and Substantive Plan, section 5, Substantive Plan to Solve World Hunger, about method 2. So as usual, we're going to start off with a quote about how True Father was preparing to essentially bring the solution to world hunger. He says, every year 20 million people die of starvation. That is 60,000 people a day. Is the President of the United States going to take responsibility for that? Will Gorbachev of the Soviet Union take responsibility? Who will take responsibility for this? Who in the world is going to do that? The true parents and the siblings of the true parents have to take responsibility for it. For this reason, all our work with the sea is something I've been planning and preparing for over the last 20 years. So in the last episode, we had begun discussing True Father's plan on the ocean providence, the specific substantive plan that True Father had, and today's episode is going to be the continuation of that. So just to review, right? This is kind of the context and the history of this, right? In 1954, HSAU-WC was established, and that marked the first 40-year course as HSAU-WC. And then in 1974, August 1st, True Parents started the North American Ocean Providence, and from there was 20 years of North American Ocean Providence. And on August 1st, 1994, there was the 20th anniversary expo of the North American Ocean Providence, where True Father had held that expo and had revealed his plan for ocean providence and his ideal and his vision for it in the speech titled The Development of the Oceanic Realm. And then in that same year was the establishment of FFWPU, and in the following year was the Sao Paulo Declaration, where it was the start of the second 40-year course as FFWPU. Now, that 20-year course we had learned that 20-year course of North American Ocean Providence we had learned was basically the preparation for solving the problem of world hunger. So we were essentially supposed to establish this foundation based on global economic foundation and rich marine resources of the United States, and basically use that to solve world hunger and essentially establish world peace. And then on August 1st, 1994, we, talked about how there was the Ocean Providence Expo, which was held at Belvedere, New York. Now, that 20-year anniversary expo of the North American Ocean Providence was held on August 1st, 1994, and it was basically the culmination of 20 years and a stepping stone to begin the South American Providence. Then, in front of the true children and leaders from all around the world and thousands of members, right, he spoke about the entire plan for the future of Ocean Providence and clarified the future direction that we were to follow. Now, this is kind of the outline of that speech that True Father gave, and essentially the outline of True Father's substantive plan to solve world hunger. And we talked about last time, part 1, which was the distribution of food at low cost, and today we're going to be talking about part 2. Now, the first method that we talked about last episode, was we titled it Distribute Ample Supplies of Food at Low Cost. And it basically involved a combination of large transport ships, small boats to build a large global network to deliver food to the world's starving population. And at the same time, we were supposed to promote hobby tourism business and develop a global distribution sales network. And we saw that this was True Father's attempt to create a very vast human and economic base that can permanently solve the world's physical problems. And in today's episode, we'll be getting into the content of method 2, which was essentially to provide technology to overcome hunger. So the first method was to basically gather the food resources and be able to give it to people all over the world. And today we're going to be talking about method 2. So first, we're going to be talking about the content of the second method to solve poverty and hunger. Then we're also going to be talking about True Father's method and proposal to shorten the providence of restoration. And then we're also going to be just basically summarizing the whole part 2, the goal and the plan of Ocean Providence. So first, let's take a look at what True Father said about this second method during the speech on August 1st, 1994, which was to provide technology to overcome poverty. So the first step in sharing technology to overcome hunger was essentially to spread aquaculture, or basically fish farming, to poorer areas so that people can secure food locally through fishing. Now, what did Your Father say about this? He said, if there's water, fish also live there. If there's one male and one female fish, the fry can breed indefinitely. If you adjust the water temperature well and raise the fry, you can breed the fish naturally. We can place about 10 juvenile fish in a plastic bag with a small hole and drop it into lakes with a low-flying Cessna plane. All you have to do is sit in the control room and instruct the aircraft number and so and so to drop this kind of fish here and this other aircraft to drop this kind of fish over there. Then schools of different kinds of fish will settle in lakes all around the world. If we breed fish, tens of thousands of households can eat from a single lake. All of the family members can eat by fishing on the lake. So what your father's saying here is basically explaining the basics of fish farming and how we can easily bring it to and spread it to different places all over the world. He continues to say, you can fish anytime, anywhere. You don't need money, and in an hour you can learn it in no time. If in doubt, please pray. It helps to feed the children and make a living, and it also helps the husband who's struggling at work. You can make as much money as you want by selling fish. You will be able to survive in the hinterlands of Africa and in any wilderness. Aquaculture can be expanded anywhere. The number of fish that live in the sea is infinite. There is a limit to the land, but there's no limit to the sea. We will cultivate the resources of the sea, and thanks to us, lay the foundation for people all over the world to eat. Don't you think it's a project that I should be interested in? So he's essentially saying that fish farming is not only easy to spread all over the world, but it's also a way to help people actually gain their own economic foundation, make their own economic base. So as a summary of, this very short step, right? So according to Father's words, it sounds like he wanted to essentially spread fish farming in all lakes, large and small, in the impoverished areas all over the world in order to create this environment in which people would be able to fish for food anytime they wanted and needed. So anyone would be able to feed their families by learning aquaculture and fishing. And then not only that, but they would also be able to create this economic foundation through selling fish on their own. So it not only teaches them how to self-sustain with food, but it also teaches them how to self-sustain with the money that they can get by selling that kind of fish. Step 8 is to teach fishing, hunting, and agriculture, these 3 skills. So True Father basically wanted blessed families to master fishing, hunting, and farming so that we would be able to teach people in the impoverished areas as a way to overcome hunger, transforming a starving population into a productive one. So True Father explains, he asks, why do you have to starve? Right? All you have to do is hunt and overcome hunger. All members of the Unification Church have to learn hunting and fishing. Why do you learn? This is to save those who are starving to death. It is a capability that must be acquired for that purpose. So True Father wanted us to learn these skills, this hunting and fishing, not just for the sake of learning to hunt and fish, right? It was for the sake of others. It had a greater purpose. What is the value of animals when many of God's children die? True Father asks. Animal offerings are almost always made to perform religious ceremonies. That is why I train you as priests to catch the animals for offerings. This is a holy act. Do you understand? So he's basically saying, that this act of hunting, this act of fishing, this act of, killing an animal for the sake of another human being's life, is similar to, this holy act, right? Like priests. So he's essentially telling us that we have a bigger purpose when we are taking these lives of animals, right? It's for the purpose of saving God's children. He says, learn fishing and hunting and then go to Africa for missions. You will go out to the whole world. Then what is the third thing that we should learn to save people? It's agriculture. The whites who came to colonize the third world did not teach agricultural techniques. If we use the agricultural techniques developed here in Texas New Hope Forum to educate 100,000 to 150,000 people and dispatch them to develop the third world such as Africa, no one will starve to death in the world. From now on, you all have to learn. The Unification members will have to learn fishing, hunting, and farming in the future. It's basic knowledge as a human being, but don't you think you won't lose anything by giving it a try to acquire the capabilities? Once you have the skills, you go to Africa and do some service activities for about a year. So your father's essentially saying that he wanted us members to learn these skills, right? Fishing, hunting, farming, fish farming, so that we would be able to take these skills and bring it to places where people don't know these skills. And we would be able to teach it to them efficiently so that these people would actually be able to learn to be self-sufficient. So a summary of the whole method 2, right? So in method 1, we basically talked about establishing food distribution networks centered on ships and boats. And in method 2, we're essentially talking about spreading aquaculture and blessed families to spread globally to teach fishing, hunting, and agriculture to the people struggling with hunger in order to help them overcome further hunger problems. So also, by spreading technology and by spreading this knowledge, by teaching these people, poorer nations will be able to develop their own area and further promote the equalization of the world by bringing up the standard of living in their own areas. Now, on August 1st, right, in that same speech, True Father also, he talked about these plans, but he also talked about, the time frame that it takes to, fulfill the providence of restoration. And he proposed, this idea of ocean providence. He proposed this whole plan as a way to shorten the providence of restoration. He asks the members, right, listening to the story thus far, did you get a concrete image of how to rescue Africans? Do you want to shorten or extend the providence of restoration? And of course, the members at the time, they said, I want to shorten it. And even us right now, we would say, I want to shorten it. Then you would have to be taught how I would do it, he says. Would you like to see the world's 5 billion people bow in the mornings and evenings saying, thank you, true parents, within a few decades before you die? Do you want to see it while you are alive? Yes. We have to hurry, True Father says. So how do you do it? He then explains Christianity has enthusiastically evangelized for 2,000 years, bringing the Christian population to 1 billion. Everyone admits that it is now impossible to save the world with Christianity. Only 15% of the world's 5 billion people live comfortably, while the rest are putting all of their energy into just getting by. Even if 1 billion are Christians, the remaining 4 billion are not interested in Christianity. If it takes 2,000 years to evangelize 1 billion people, how many years will it take to evangelize 5 billion people? So what he's saying here is Christianity has been going at evangelizing for 2,000 years, right? And even now, only a portion of the world's population is Christian. So if we want to, evangelize the entire world, how much longer would that take, right? True Father says, however, True Father knows that we need to fulfill providence of restoration within our time, right? It can't take thousands of years like Christianity has been taking. So then True Father proposes ocean providence, and he says, what do they feel when 4 billion people who are trying to survive here, that Reverend Moon has been struggling to prepare for them for 20 years and brought food to them? Will they welcome you? And when they know, will they welcome you when they know that they have been saved from hunger by you and Reverend Moon? It's clear, right? They will want to stay in the Unification Church all the time. In a short period of time, while the world looks on in blank amazement, billions of people will enroll in the Unification Church. So he's basically saying, he's basically proposing ocean providence as a way to shorten that providence of restoration. Right, looking at what True Father said on that day, we can see that an effective way to shorten the period of providence of restoration is not through normal or ordinary witnessing and outreach and evangelizing. In order to return the world to the peaceful world that would have been before the fall, we have to first of all live for the sake of all people of the world. We have to actually live for the sake of the others, right? And be able to testify to these people we live for and work together with them to solve all physical and social problems of the world. And when we put into practice True Father's plan for the ocean providence, we should be able to testify to the people of the world through our substantial actions, through our visible actions, and through that we should be able to build a system of cooperation to bring about a world of peace. And this is the reason that True Father had said that the foundation on the ocean is the fastest way to bring people and nations together. People will see our substantial actions where we are sincerely, truly living for the sake of others, and they will see that we're being serious, and they will want to support us. They will want to join us. In this way, if we carry out missionary activities, we can choose the president at the time of elections. Political reform is not a problem. Missionary work creates political power. God wants it and everyone is waiting for it. Do you guys want it too? We need to lay the foundation for political power. It is your turn to spread out and teach others. Do you want to do a job inferior to what I have done? Or do you want to accomplish further than me? You are much younger than me, aren't you? Are you going to rely on an old man who's close to 80 years old to work? If you do that, heaven will punish you for it. Until now, I have struggled to lay the foundation. So from now on, I would like to look around the foundation you are laying. So True Father is now, True Father, at the time was nearing 80 years old. And even now, True Mother's, is getting older by the year, right? And as their children, it is now our turn, right? We should take responsibility, take that burden off our parents' shoulders. Right? And that's what True Father wanted from us, right? He wanted us to take the responsibility, take on Ocean Providence from him. He says, right? Or will you continue to make me experience the same hardships as in the last 2 decades? Can I declare that the next 20 years is your era? He wanted us to take responsibility, take ownership of the next 20 years for Ocean Providence. We must fulfill God's will in our time. The world will be saved if you are determined and serve with devotion. He then closes the speech, right? He says, I started Ocean Church Providence 20 years ago, but only I am left at the end. The next 20 years will be your time. Are you all ready to go this way? If you want to do it, raise both hands and swear before God. May God bless you. Manse. So at the end of his speech, True Father basically lamented, that he was alone in the Ocean Providence at the end. Right? We should be the ones to liberate True Father's resentment by advancing his plan. Right? Clearly, the completion of Ocean Providence is the blessed family's responsibility. We are the ones that are to take ownership of this. And the Ocean Providence is, as he said, a shortcut to world peace and a method to shorten the providence of restoration so that we can accomplish, restoration, this 6,000-year long restoration, within our time. And within our time doesn't mean within the next century or within the next 1,000 years, right? It means within the next few decades, right? It's in our time. It's in our generation. So in summary, right, True Father had engaged in Ocean Providence throughout his entire life, and in the process, he invested in countless projects and trained members on the ocean ceaselessly until the very end of his earthly life. And I think we can glimpse, right, a very consistent connection behind all of his efforts within his speech he gave on August 1st, 1994. And we can see that the various accomplishments that he had made were not just isolated projects, right? But they were clearly connected as a part of this grand plan, this grand vision that he had aimed to a permanent solution to the world's hunger problem. And as we read, Ocean Providence is this method to shorten that providence of restoration and to bring an end to it. So we are going to conclude part 2, Ocean Church and Substantive Plan, with this episode. So at this point, we're going to summarize the whole thing, True Parents' goals and the plans for the Ocean Providence. So the goals and the plans of Ocean Providence. Now, first off, right, we have to understand that without clear goals and plans, it's impossible to make appropriate decisions. So take this man, for example, right? He needs to go on a journey. But in order to even go on a journey, he first needs to understand his purpose. What's his destination? Where is he supposed to go? Then he needs to understand his plan, right? What path should he take to actually get to his destination? And then he needs to understand his current situation. Where is he right now in relation to his purpose, in relation to his destination? And then once he understands these 3 points of his purpose, his plan, and his current situation, only then is he able to understand what next step he's supposed to take and what he can prepare to take that next step and move forward. And only when he, understands purpose, plan, current situation, and can answer what's the next step, what should he prepare next, can he then say, okay, let's go. So the same thing is for us, right? We need to understand the purpose, the plan, and the current situation in order to understand, what we need to do now. And if we don't clearly, know the purpose and the goal, we also cannot understand the true value of, in this situation, what True Parents had invested in. Right? True Father actually mentions this in a speech he made in 2004. He says, you unificationists must fulfill your responsibility to lead them and care for these people. You should improve standards. This is how you can save people who would otherwise starve to death. This is why I sent 4 boats each to 160 nations. You are thinking, what's the use of doing that? Because your hearts and minds are not enlightened. But I am telling you, we must do it. So in 2004, at the 30th year mark since the establishment of the North American Ocean Providence, True Father said these words of lamentation that we, as members, we didn't understand the purpose. We didn't know the purpose of Ocean Providence. We didn't know why True Father built the boat. We didn't know the why. We didn't understand the purpose. And because of that, we could not understand the value, the true value of the things that he was investing in, the things that he was doing. We didn't understand the value of Ocean Providence or the boats. So in order to understand that value, we need to understand that purpose. We need to understand that why. And then along with needing to understand, that purpose, we also need to understand the plan, right? Even if we know the goal, if we don't know the plan, we won't be able to reach the goal, right? Nothing will happen if we just assume it will come naturally or just hope that someone else will do it, right? As you can see in the illustration to the left, right? A person with clear and detailed plan, with a very clear understanding of the plan, aka that ladder that has a lot of rings, will be able to reach their goal and destination easier, versus a person who only knows the outline, a very loose ladder, right, of the plan, will have a very hard time actually executing the plan despite knowing exactly where they're supposed to go. So along with knowing the plan, they also need to know how to subdivide the plan. Right? There's a necessity of subdividing the plan. So even if we know the outline of the goal and the plan, we can't put it into practice if we don't actually subdivide it. So since True Father had clarified the outline of the plan, we have to further subdivide this outline in order to pioneer the detailed steps ourselves and put it into practice. Now, remember that the ultimate goal is world peace, right? True Father says, I have lived my life with just one thought. I want to bring about a world of peace, a world where there are no wars and where all humankind lives in love. What I want is to wipe away completely the walls and fences that divide the world in a myriad ways and to create a world of unity. I want to tear down the walls between religions and between races and fill in the gap between the rich and the poor. Once that is done, we can reestablish the world of peace that God created in the beginning. I'm talking about a world where no one goes hungry and no one sheds tears. So True Father essentially want to reestablish the world of peace that God created in the beginning. And arching from that, right, he wanted to tear down the walls between religions, basically the unity of religions. He wanted to tear down the walls between races and unite all people. And then he wanted to fill in the gap between the rich and the poor and basically resolve poverty and hunger and equalization. So this is basically, so these are the goals, right? And then there's, this very loose framework of the plan, right? To tear down the walls, to fill in the gap between the rich and the poor, right? And then we need to subdivide the plan. And True Father explained this, right? In his speech. There was method 1, which was to distribute ample supplies of food at low cost. And there was method 2, to provide technology to overcome poverty. And method 1 was essentially securing food resources and then giving and distributing that food to all the people in the world who need it. And method 2 was things like popularization of aquaculture, right? Essentially spreading fish farming, spreading technology, techniques, and skills to help people overcome hunger and essentially raise the living standards of those areas. So the goal of method 1, right, is essentially to give the hungry population a chance to regain their healthy mind and body. Now, let me explain this, right? So we explained in part 1.3, which was about the hunger problem, the reason why it's so difficult to educate people who are stuck in this vicious cycle of poverty and hunger. And the reason why they have a hard time actually retaining information and actually learning after a long period of time of starvation, right, is because when they're in a period of malnutrition for a very long, consistent time, their learning abilities become impaired and very limited due to stunting. So in this vicious cycle of poverty, the human spirit is also violated, right? Food becomes even more important than things like order, morality, human rights, ideologies, right? And people tend to begin to commit violent crimes for the sake of food. It's not that they're evil, it's just that they put food over these other values, right? Because if they don't, then they die, right? So essentially being in the state of poverty, being in the state of hunger for a very prolonged period of time causes people to, lose both mental and physical health. So in order to become healthy, both physically and mentally, again, it is important to first help these people have an environment that can help them be fed continuously so that they don't have to worry about this kind of issue again. So in method 1, which is to distribute ample supplies of food at low cost, the first goal is to basically essentially build that global distribution network in order to sustain this environment to help feed the world's starving population so that we can help them break free from the vicious cycle of poverty. And then True Father explains, along with, this method 1, there's also the importance of method 2, right? Which is essentially teaching a person, right? Spreading education and knowledge. So he says, in his autobiography, teach a person how to make bread and then give them a piece of bread. Teach a person how to make bread, then give a piece of bread. So he says, to solve the problem of hunger, we must have a heart that is willing to plant seeds. Seeds are planted and wait unseen under the soil until they are able to germinate and break through their outer cover. Similarly, it is better to teach a person how to plant and harvest wheat and then turn it into bread than it is to give a piece of bread to a person who is about to die. It is the only way to arrive at a fundamental and sustainable solution to world hunger. So it can be said, right, that True Father concluded that teaching people how to produce their own food would be a more fundamental and lasting solution to hunger than merely just giving the person food. So the goal of method 2 is to essentially help, the hungry population become a productive population and help them contribute to equalization of the world. So a starving population that's grown stunted, right, is left unproductive, right, because they're mentally and physically stunted. So therefore, first and foremost, we have to create, the situation, the environment that can help feed them continuously so that they can get out of that situation. So it will, of course, take time, right? A very long time to actually help them, regain that health. But if we can maintain this environment and feed them through method 1, then they can restore both external and internal health and transform into then a productive population. So with a healthy mind and body, they can then learn skills to help to survive hunger, right? And take charge of their own food problems, right? And it will, basically help them revitalize areas of poverty and contribute to the equalization of the world. And eventually, right, they will then be able to escape from being in a poverty-stricken nation, and the entire world will gradually equalize. So basically, if we put this into the outline of True Father's substantive plan, essentially the goal of method 1, the distribution of food at low cost, is to basically build a global distribution network centered on blessed families and continuously deliver food to the starving people of the world so that we can create the environment that can help them restore their sound mind and body. And then the goal of method 2, which is to share technology to overcome hunger, is to essentially raise the productivity of that poor area and make those poor countries self-reliant, self-sustaining, and achieve global economic equalization, where we can really help them raise their own living standards. And then through that, we'll be able to establish, the goal of realizing a world where no one starves, and the ultimate goal where we can accomplish world peace and unification. Now, so we're talking a lot about these external things, right? So in short, right, method 1 is distribution of food supplies and method 2 is technological education. But I'm sure, some of you, or if not many of you, must be thinking, right, then what about the ideological education, right? What about DP, blessing, these different important values about love and peace, right? True Father thought, though, that ideological education for the hungry and the poor would be done after the food problem was solved. He says so here, right? He says, resolving the food situation does not mean that peace will follow immediately. After the hunger issue has been resolved, it is important to carry out educational programs on peace and love. So he says clearly, right, that with regards to the hungry population, and this is not talking about, developed countries, this is talking about developing countries, right? In regards to these people who are in these poor regions, after resolving their hunger issue, then we can talk to these people about education, about peace and love. Right, now, there's a real life example who actually, followed very similar kind of thinking, right? And this is Mr. Tetsu Nakamura. He was a Japanese Christian who had built irrigation canals that saved the lives of 650,000 people in Afghanistan, where hunger continues to this day due to conflict and drought. And he, one of the things that he said basically was, What I advocate is not human rights or lofty ideals, right? But concrete life prolonging measures. So he essentially continued to work. Saying that rather than preaching human rights and ideals and these different values that he believed in, right? First and foremost, the thing that he worked on was, getting the concrete methods to prolong the life of the people there, through food and water. Now, all of this is very big, right? So essentially, so True Father was essentially wanting to resolve not just like ideological things, but also physical problems, right? He wanted to end world hunger, and that's a huge, large-scale project. And he also, along with that, wanted to teach these people, about ideology. So it's a very big project. It's very daunting, right? And because it's so huge, we might want to believe in true parents. We might want to be optimistic. We might want to have faith in what they're saying. But such a large-scale project it seems impossible. So then we might ask, where are we even going to get the funds to do this? Do we even have the, materials or any other resources, right? It seems impossible. The scale seems big, it seems unrealistic, right? So listening to everything so far, a lot of us might feel this way, right? We tend to feel this kind of doubt toward true parents at times, or any big goal in general. But let's take a look back at what True Father had said and what is actually happening in the world. Now, True Father said, as we become leading companies in the marine industry and serve the world, nations around the world will support us. Now, what does that mean, right? True Father made this statement at his speech at the 20th anniversary event. And if we build a foundation for solving food problems even little by little, our actions and their results will show everyone our true intentions and our seriousness toward world peace. Right? Naturally, we will gain the support of governments and organizations around the world, such as the UN, which claims to achieve and maintain world peace. So essentially, True Father, what he's saying is that through Ocean Providence, through working toward world peace by solving world hunger sincerely, truly with the hope and with the purpose of living for the sake of others, people around the world, organizations around the world, governments around the world will see what we're doing, and they will naturally want to support us. There are many people, and it's not just us, right? There are many people who are aiming to solve the food problems of the world. Right? Since hunger is a common human issue, there are many religious groups in the world, such as Christianity and Islam, that are dedicated to solving the hunger problem. There are also various organizations founded by philanthropists as well. So here are some examples, right? There's World Food Program. That's a very famous one that many people know about, right? The UN World Food Program, which was established in 1961, they collect approximately $8.4 billion annually from donations from 78 countries and provide food to 110 million people in 84 countries. Then there's Heifer International, which was founded in 1994, and they teach basically sustainable agriculture to 40 million starving families in 21 countries. And that's, that kind of sounds familiar, right? Because it is, right? True Father was saying that this is something that he wanted to do. Then there's also Action Against Hunger, which was founded in 1979 by French doctors, and they have helped offer preventative care to 25 million malnourished people in 45 nations. Then there's the Hunger Project, founded in 1977, and it's worked in 23 developing nations to help poor people become self-sufficient, especially women, through economic training. Then there's Rise Against Hunger, which was founded in 1998, and it has provided food distribution and agricultural and technical training to combat hunger in 78 countries. Then there's Feeding America, Mercy Corps, Bread for the World, World Central Kitchen, right? And there are so many different organizations around the world, right? And so these are maybe bigger ones, but there are definitely smaller organizations that maybe just started this year. Essentially, we are not alone, right? We are not alone in this world. We're not the only group of people that want to help save the world. We're not the only group of people who want to resolve world hunger. We're not alone in this situation, right? Now, this is a tweet by Elon Musk, who's the world's richest man, and this was made in 2021. He basically said, if World Food Program, can describe on this Twitter thread exactly how $6 billion will solve world hunger, I will sell Tesla stock right now and do it. So what he's essentially saying is that if you have a clear plan, then I'll help you accomplish that plan. I'll actually give you the funds to do it. So of course, we won't know until we actually try it. But if we, go through with Ocean Providence's plan, and if we have a certain level of foundation and we can prove our plan works, and prove the potential of that plan and our ability to actually progress that plan, there's a very high possibility that philanthropists and entrepreneurs like Elon Musk around the world will want to support us, or will want to donate to us, will want to actually invest in us. So religions, nations, and the wealthy, we're all thinking about the food problem, right? Many, many people, including religious groups, UN, government, entrepreneurs, and philanthropists, are all thinking about the food problem and working toward its resolution. If you go out on the streets and you ask people if they want the world hunger problem to be resolved, I'm pretty sure most, if not everybody, will say yes to that, right? Whether they believe it's possible or not, many people, everybody wants this problem to be resolved. So as we carry out True Father's plan, a cooperative relationship will surely emerge. Naturally, people will want to help with the cause. It's a content that can essentially unite countries and people around the world. And in chapter 7 of True Father's autobiography, he says, the oceans can become, this effort to solving world hunger can become central point for bringing the world together. The ocean can become that bridge between religions, between countries, and between the rich and the poor. All religions, businesses, and nations must come together to solve the currently worsening hunger problem. The attempt is trans-religious, trans-ethnic, and a movement that can bridge the gap between the rich and the poor. And a good example, right, we can actually learn from Mr. Tetsu Nakamura, right? His attempt at solving hunger in Afghanistan accomplished the following. First of all, he tore down the wall between religions, right? He was Christian and the people he was helping was Muslim, but that didn't matter, right? They still united. 2, he was able to tear down the wall between races. He was Japanese and they were Afghan, right? But they were able to, they went past that. And 3, his activity actually helped to reduce the gap between the rich and the poor, between the rich Japan and the poor Afghanistan. So we can learn from this real life example. And, Mr. Tetsu Nakamura also is kind of proof that we are not alone in this world who are trying to help the world, right? There's so many people we can work with, so many people in this world who we can collaborate with. The True Father says the oceans can become a central point for bringing the world together, right? The oceans, working on this hunger problem will unite religions, tear down the walls between the religions and bring unity between them. We will unite nations and tear down the wall between races and all people. And we will be able to become this bridge between the rich and the poor and fill in that gap between the rich and the poor and essentially solve poverty and hunger and bring equalization. So this is the central point for reestablishing the world of peace that God created in the beginning. So at first, we will have to of course, steadily build up a foundation and various milestones step by step. But as we grow with other organizations, right, we will be able to receive great support and reach our goals faster than we can even imagine. Don't you think that's possible? It definitely is not too late to put True Father's plan into action. Now, this is a summary of part 1 and part 2, all the things that we've talked about so far. So in part 1, which was Introduction to Ocean Providence, we talked about how True Parent's ultimate goal is to realize a substantial world of peace. And then we talked about the concrete goal of Ocean Providence being the resolution of the hunger problem. And then in part 2, Ocean Church and Substantive Plan, we discussed True Parent's substantive plan to solve world hunger. In part 2.2, we talked about the unfortunate reality of, however, True Father's hope and expectations seem to not have been disappointed time and time again. Now, in the upcoming part 3, History of Ocean Providence, we will further look at the current situation as we analyze this part of history. Now, this is a quote from True Father in God's Will in the Ocean. Just to end us off, right? He says, "This has to be done." Right? Ocean Providence has to be done. For the future, someone has to do it. You are my hope. If you don't know that, you cannot understand even who you are. The one who is close to me is the one who will determine to be successful on the ocean. Thank you for listening.